as I look back at that little cross-country road trip, I just think of that girl did not know what she was getting herself into. Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my channel. Today's video is going to be a series within a series. It's going to be the Gym Talk series, but also in addition to this video, I'm going to be dropping 2 other videos about my experience living in LA. So definitely be on the lookout for those in the future. As from the title of this video, you are obviously interested in what I have to say about me moving and leaving LA in the same year.
Oh my God!
You heard that right. In addition, I will be throwing in tips from my learning experience in order to help you if you are also thinking about moving to LA as well. So hopefully this video won't be too long, but without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay, so as per usual, I have notes on the side, so I'm gonna be looking back and forth. My notes just help me articulate my thoughts to get it better across to you guys. I always wanted to move to LA to fulfill my childhood dream of just wanting to live there. I used to watch the show called The Hills. I don't know if you guys heard of it. It used to come on MTV like years ago. Now looking back, like my life really mimicked Lauren Conrad's. So Lauren Conrad was the main character in this show. So she went to fashion school and also lived in LA, and I went to fashion school in New York, and then I moved to LA. She used to work for this lady called Kelly Cutrone, the CEO of this big PR firm in LA. And one year at my school's fashion show, Kelly Cutrone was hosting, and I actually got to meet her. So it's just kind of weird like how our lives kind of actually matched up. So after a couple of months of graduating fashion school, I was just like, I'm just gonna go ahead and make the move. Initial plan when I moved out there was to go into fashion with the major that I graduated with. And before I moved, I was like, okay, LA is another good market for fashion, just as New York. I just didn't prefer to stay in New York. So I was like, for fashion, it's gonna work in LA too. So what my plan was to do was to get transferred from my job that I was currently at to another store in LA, but that didn't end up happening as smoothly as I wanted it to go. There ended up being no available positions for me, and they kind of just wanted to offer me a position that was downgrading from the position I was already in. So I was like, I'm just not gonna do that. And a couple of months into my move, a position did become available for what I was doing back at home, but when I applied, then the hiring managers kept just giving me the runaround, or they just didn't get back to me at all. So that kind of just fell through. I kind of was just getting tired of keep reaching out to them and just getting no answer. So within that first week of moving, I had a couple of interviews lined up. Needless to say, they all fell through. One company basically ghosted me after going through all the interview processing, and towards the end, the manager was drafting up my offer letter. Then I just never heard anything back from them. And I'm just like, I reached back out to them, I followed up with them, and nothing. The other interviews I went on were trash, because a couple of them, they were trying to offer me a salary that was lesser than when I was getting paid back at home. And I live in Maryland, and I was just like, oh, that just really didn't make sense. The cost of living is higher in LA. Why are you offering me a salary that's less than what I got paid back at home? I declined all of those positions because I was like, I know my worth. If I have a bachelor's in this particular role, then I should be getting properly compensated for that. So I just was not with taking less than what I deserve. So all the while the interview processing was going with my other job, I decided that I was gonna go enroll in bartending school to get my bartending license. What attracted me to that particular school was that they said that they will place you in jobs while you're learning. So I was like, cool, I could be working while I'm also in the process of trying to actually get into the role that I actually want to be in, so I could just make money in the meantime. The jobs they ended up offering were kind of like busboy jobs, and they were paying like $11 an hour, and I was just like, no chap. I ended up not finishing bartending school because it just wasn't really what I thought, or as easy as I thought it was gonna be. So with that being said, my money and time went to waste. So what I ended up doing for work with my time in LA was freelancing, and I will definitely touch more about this in my next video that I'm gonna do about LA, about the cool opportunities that I did get to do while I was there. So this brings me to my first tip, which is don't move to LA without a solid job. Definitely have something secured before you move out there. I would first recommend, if you have a job that's transferable, and if they have it like an office in LA, definitely do that first. And now looking back at the situation, I could say that I definitely was just in a rush to move, that I really didn't care about the job, and that I think I was just so focused on plan A working that I just really didn't have a plan B for my career. And also too, I will say, when I was doing my job search while I was still back at home, I found that some companies were more willing to look for the candidate that was already in LA versus waiting on for the person to have to move. So it's kind of less of a step for companies to worry about you having to move. Like, they just want that candidate kind of right now. But if you are the type to hustle your way with working, by all means do that, because people do that in LA as well. For me, I just wasn't used to that mindset, because when I would get jobs back at home or while I was working in New York, I kind of would just apply for a few jobs and I would just get that job right away. I guess my mindset when I did move to LA was that my resume was gonna speak for me, but it didn't turn out to be quite that simple. So, which brings me to my next tip about how much money to save before moving to LA. My tip is to have 3 good months worth of rent and additional living expenses saved up. So when talking about numbers of how much to save, it's definitely going to vary from person to person, depending on what they're comfortable with and what their lifestyle is like. But I will share how much I moved out there with versus what I think I should have moved out there with now looking back. So I saved a little over $3,000 to move out there with. I was using this money towards my rent, my first month rent, and security deposit, which is definitely a factor you need to consider depending on the area and type of apartment you are getting. Average studios in LA are about starting from $1,000 to $1,500, and that's studios. Studios square footage is, you're really not gonna get that much space. Again, it depends, but mine's was about an average of 500 square foot. 1 bedroom, 1 bathrooms are gonna be $1,500 and up. 2 bedroom, 2 bath is, you're gonna be looking at $2,000 and up. In addition to security deposit plus your rent. When I say additional living expenses, I'm talking about utility bills, food, spending money, and just money for unforeseen circumstances. All these things will add up, and also you have to think about that the cost of living in LA is much high. And I had so many unforeseen circumstances that I had to kick out money for. Believe me when I say that LA will take every dime of your money. So that's why I say if you're moving here without a job, you definitely need to have backup money to fall back on. I would say a good number is definitely $8,000 to $10,000 saved prior to moving to LA. So this segues into my third tip, which is having a roommate when you find an apartment when you first move here in LA. I opted out of having a roommate because I was just not with it. First off, I got a studio, and I just was over that roommate process. I just had roommates all throughout college. I just did not want to be sharing my space anymore. So that's why I opted out of having a roommate. But having a roommate definitely will save you a couple of $100s in rent. And also, if you're moving to LA by yourself, this gives you an opportunity to kind of get acquainted with someone to help kind of make your experience better. Facebook groups is a good way to find roommates in LA. When I was going back and forth between do I want a roommate, do I not, I was looking at this Facebook group called Black Book Housing LA. So definitely check them out if you are in the market for a roommate. My tip number 4 is having a car while in LA. Now, this could be a good thing or a bad thing. Now, the pros to having a car is if you are traveling far distances by yourself, because LA is very, very spread out. When you have a car, one thing you do have to worry about is gas, and for me, gas was double the price from where I was from. It costed like $20 to $25 to fill up my tank. In LA, it was definitely $40 and up to have a full tank. The second thing to worry about is the parking in LA. It is definitely a hassle. You definitely should expect to pay for parking majority of places where you go. And the thing about LA too is that you have these multiple signs that you have to look and follow all the restrictions and stuff like that. Also be aware of the days where there's like street sweeping. You'll definitely get fined for that if your car is found during those street sweeping times. I definitely had to pay like about over $500 in parking violations. It was a headache. Side note, which brings me to when you look for an apartment, definitely make sure that apartment has a parking space included. Mine didn't. I just didn't think about that at the time. I think I was just thinking like, oh, it's gonna be like back at home where it's like, oh, you find street parking, it's fine. No. Like, it was such a hassle coming home every night and having to find parking. Like, I would have to take like a good I would have to park like a ways from my apartment, so it ended up being like a 5 to 8 minute walk from my car back to my apartment. It was definitely a headache every day, which brings me to why I ended up Ubering to a lot of places when I went out, and Uber adds up as well. So you're talking about I have to pay my car payments, my car insurance, and I'm also paying for Uber as well. So but my friend who took Uber and she didn't have a car, she said she was probably paying about the same as my car payment and my car insurance within a month. So I don't know, it's give or take, but I definitely think it's more beneficial to have a car in LA because you kind of can just go whenever you want to without having to like rely on Uber. And also too, one thing you're gonna have to worry about is the traffic in LA. I will never forget that I was only going 8 miles and it took me an hour to go 8 miles. Like, that's how bad the traffic is in LA. So do not be surprised. You are definitely going to be sitting in some traffic if you're driving all the time. Oh my gosh, I can just tell you about so many of my driving experiences. Like driving from Santa Monica to downtown, an hour. I lived close to downtown, so it took me an hour. That was the worst drive ever. Like the 405, I want to say that's the 405 highway, I want to say, but I don't really remember, but I think it is the worst, the absolute worst. And LA drivers are the worst. Like, I would literally see accidents every day. Like, they do not know how to drive at all, which is surprising that the insurance, the car insurance LA is actually cheaper than back at home, which I found surprising because I would have thought it would have been higher because the accidents that I've seen every day was just ridiculous. I will also say my experience with driving and like the hills and stuff, the scariest thing ever, because sometimes like up in the hills they don't have like side railings to protect, you know, if a car like kind of like swerve, like no, God forbid. But driving up in the hills and the mountains was definitely a really scary experience. That was a side note. Okay, so by this point, a couple of months into my move to LA, I was definitely confused on the direction of, was this the right move? Was this the right time to move? Because my career wasn't panning out as I thought it would be. I felt that LA was eating up all my finances. I was just in a place where I was stuck. I was just like, was this the right thing to do? So I'm a very spiritual person, and I turn to God for guidance and just clarity on my move there. So I talked a little about this in one of my other videos, which was my testimony and relationship with God, so definitely check that out. I will leave a link to that video down in the description box if you are interested in going back to watch that. But God really started to give me clarity on what I asked him for. He reminded me of this sermon that I watched a year prior to my move to LA. The synopsis of this sermon was going ahead of God's timing and having the right thing in the wrong season. Going ahead and not consulting God before making a big life-changing decision. So God will really show you when you make big life decisions on your own without consulting him first, you will have to sustain those decisions on your own, versus with going with decisions that you did consult God with first and having his hand on it and him blessing that decision which you asked him advice on. So to put in a better perspective, Mike Todd, who I've mentioned before, this is also where I learned this example where I'm gonna show you about in this sermon. So Mike Todd, when he was younger, he wanted to be a producer, a music producer, but God was telling him, like, if you go that route, yeah, you may be good at it, but God's hands wouldn't be on it. And now, because of him choosing the direction that God gave him, look at him now. He has this amazing platform where he's changing millions of people's lives through God's word, including mine. God has blessed him in so many ways that he never thought of. And I think that he also ended up working with Kanye in the realm of the music producing. But I say all this to say that he still got to fulfill his childhood dream in a way, but it was just going in a different direction than what he thought. In another sermon that God presented to me, but it was from a different pastor, but it was similar to Mike Todd's story as well, was that the pastor had this childhood dream that he wanted to fulfill. God wanted to show him, or I guess bring up out of him, was that dream backed by meaning and purpose. So God really used my decision to move to LA as a life lesson. I still think that I needed some inner work, or I guess God showed me that I still needed some inner work that I needed to work, and I felt that LA was going to be a distraction from that. God truly showed me what I needed and what I asked him for through these sermons. And also I came across a couple of vlogs on YouTube where people were talking about like just life decisions, life after college, or moving to another state. And what this one girl had said really resonated with me, and I truly believe like that was exactly what I was feeling with my situation with LA. So what she said was that her move to Atlanta was the chapter that she was not supposed to open yet, and I definitely truly felt that the same way for me in LA. With hearing this, it kind of made me feel even better with my decision leaving LA and regrouping my life. I think my biggest takeaway from my experience in LA was truly experiencing what faith meant, because now that I look back, even though stuff was so chaotic and confusing, everything still worked out. I still had a roof over my head, I still had food to eat, and just living in LA, like, you just see a lot of homeless people living on the street, and you cannot go anywhere without seeing a homeless person, and in knowing that they might not ever make it out. So this whole experience with me truly made me feel grateful for the position I was in, because it could have been so much more worse. So wrapping up, what I will say is that I don't want my experience to discourage anyone from moving to LA. I just felt compelled to share my experience, because everyone's experience is going to be different when living there. I will say LA is a very, very beautiful place, from the scenery to just the houses there, just stuff to do there, the beaches, just all that stuff. It's definitely one of the most beautiful places I've seen thus far. Who knows if it's in God's will. I feel like I want to come back and claim my stake in LA again, but in the right way. And side note, I don't know if anyone watches that show. It's called Selling Sunset. It's on Netflix. Oh my gosh, it just makes me fall in love with LA all over again. Like, the houses they showcase on there is so beautiful, and I still want my house on the hills, and I will manifest that, God willing though. So I'm going to leave this video off here. Definitely be on the lookout for my other videos of a more in-depth of my experience living in LA. I'll be talking about my jobs in the entertainment industry, celebrities, things to do in LA, dating, and things of that nature. So at the end of this video, I'll be including some of my cross-country video clips. So thank you guys for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will be seeing you guys in my next one. Country road trip has finally concluded. Tear. She has to rush to the airport because she's late. And it's a bunch of traffic.
LA traffic is like New York.